Hi, welcome to the summer US Judiciary course. This is CRJ 6700 with me, Professor Jason Leggett. I'm going to walk you through the requirements of the course. This is an online asynchronous course, which means you work on your own. Of course, if you have any questions, go ahead and email me at jason.leggett@kbcc.cuny.edu. It's also in the syllabus, and you can find my email in the Outlook app as well. So what is this course about? According to the course description, it's about the judicial process. You have to look at precedent. You have to think about legal reasoning. This involves decision making on the process of prosecutors, judges, other lawyers, right? Defense lawyers, people in the process of trying to decide what they should do. What's the basis of criminal and civil lawsuits? In this case, what does the lawyer or the judge do in those situations, whether you're in criminal or civil court? How does the public feel or think about these things, especially what they think happens versus what actually happens? And then also you have to think about it in relation to the rest of the government, so the state of New York in this case, all the other 49 states, the federal court system, and the Supreme Court. You got to think about that in the context of what does that say about democracy and judicial review. And so I give you kind of a way of thinking about that through a workbook, a memorandum, some readings, some discussion boards, and a case study. And so you can kind of see the issues here, and this is how you think about it in the course. So Mac is arrested for armed robbery based on circumstantial evidence leading to a pretrial phase where he's denied bail. He's assigned an overworked public defender and has his motion to suppress a coerced confession denied by a judge perceived as tough on crime or law and order. The trial then proceeds with conflicting testimonies, with the prosecution painting Mac as desperate, and the defense argues there's a lack of evidence and there's coercion in the evidence that was obtained. So in this case now, right, you want to apply legal reasoning, which will be demonstrated through the format of legal reasoning, which is called a syllogism. It involves applying a general legal principle, just like a major premise, in this case, the right to counsel, to the specific facts that you'll be given, which then supports the minor premise, which is this ambiguous request for counsel. That's kind of a debatable subject, so you got to take a position on that. And then you need to reach a conclusion. And this is what we call the malleability of law. In this situation, you'll then want to apply various methods of constitutional interpretation. Which one do you think makes the most sense? Which one is closest to you, or what you think is the right thing to do? So is that textualism, originalism, living constitutionalism? There's another one called active liberty. There's kind of a approach to contextualism, which is like finding a social context for the text. You could invent your own. You could argue for, a lot of students want to say a balance. If you're going to say a balance between these two, then you have to show me what do you mean by that. You can't just say balance and then hope it all works out. And then you have to think about how that's actually going to be interpreted and applied by the Supreme Court, as well as other courts. So the Court of Appeals, which would be reviewing your decision, or even state courts, as they might want to look at that for ways of reasoning or arguing based on your interpretation. So if you think about learning outcome 1 and then learning outcome 2 separately, this is what we'd be doing. In the readings, you're going to be looking at what is the process of judges. How do they think about precedent, stare decisis, case law, federal and state issues? And then what does this look like through their rulings? This is going to be like a basic vocabulary, I think, for a lot of you. So I kind of want to see that in the discussion board. So when you're putting your answers in the discussion boards, did you actually use the readings to make sense of it? You're also free to use outside resources that can include AI, although, if AI is not very good at using the context, and so you might start with AI and then edit it to make it more related to the context of the course, and then add your own opinions. So like if you get something from AI and then you start editing it, you say, would I agree with this? Would I disagree with it? Or I feel this isn't quite right. That's more likely to get full points. If I just see regular AI that's like totally disconnected, what can I give you credit for? Like, you found something, so hey, yay, a point for you. But other than that, right, you're not really showing me the learning outcomes. So I kind of want to see the readings and the discussions in context. You can also think about the workbook, even the syllabus itself, which is in the overview section of Brightspace, as kind of being a guide. So the workbook can kind of help you think through these things, and also, obviously using other resources like videos and things like that can help you like add to the readings in the context of the discussion boards. And then the final exam is going to be, comprehensive in the sense that it's looking to see whether you're able to put these pieces together. If we look then at, learning outcome 2, which is more about like the individual players or the actors in the system, and then this also kind of gets more into like democratic theory, like is all this good for us as a people, as a society? Then you'll think more about like the roles of these specific people and less about the process. You'll also think about how they impact people differently based on something called intersectionality, which looks at race, gender, and sexuality, ableism, economics, right, where your position in the social class structure is, education, things like that, right? How do you look at this critically to see, is this serving everybody? Obviously it can't, right? So it's not going to, and so you have to show me that you understand that and how they interact with each other. So you'll see that through the readings, and then I want to see that in the discussions. The final scenario is going to kind of ask you to apply these situations. So you want to kind of be like building on that each week. And again, right, the workbook is a great place to practice that and to work through, right, workbook, right, work through almost as if it was like a science lab, these different ideas that you're trying to apply then on the final exam. So with all that kind of like introduction, right, what we're trying to get done in this class, I'm your professor, Professor Jason Leggett. I have a law degree. I worked in kind of a lot of different areas, and so I can bring that perspective if you're interested in pursuing a law degree. My real interest, though, is in legal theory and kind of how it applies in multiple settings, what's called comparative constitutional analysis. So I'm really interested in like how the same situation in different countries kind of plays out based on how people think the law works, how they actually work with it. And we have a very fancy word called consciousness, right? Legal consciousness or rights consciousness, which I kind of refer to as rights talk. So how people talk about their rights and what they think that means within the structures. And I'm really interested in how that operates in different structures. So Kingsborough is a fun place to work because many of you come from other countries or different cultures. And so there's a rich understanding of how these differences play out and why that creates a gap between kind of this ideal world of law and the reality that we all live in. On top of being a researcher and a theorist, right, as a philosopher, legal philosopher, I put quote unquotes you can't see, but like, these a lot of times these terms don't mean much until you go to conferences or you're applying for a job. But in everyday life, right, for somebody who thinks and reads about how people think about and act upon laws in their everyday life, that's the majority of my time, right? That's what I get paid to do. And then the teaching of classes, right, is like linked to that. But I'm also the faculty director of something called the Center for Civic Engagement at Kingsborough, which kind of looks at the theories behind why civic engagement is important. How do we do it? How can I help other faculty who want to do this in their classrooms? How do we think about this from like what you might want? So I'm always interested in hearing more about what you want. What would this look like? There's lots of different ideas about what civic learning and democratic engagement is. What does this mean to you right now in this moment? What has your experience been in your civically engaged certified courses? Do you know what those are? Things like that. I've taught here at Kingsborough for 15 years. I've taught at Barnard, at Columbia. I've participated in a lot of public talks, so I go to places where people don't necessarily think about law, and I talk with those folks. I've done that with homeless activists. I've done that with reproductive rights activists. I've done that with immigration activists. I've done that with labor union activists. I've done that with politicians. I've done that with political campaigns. I've done that with environmental activists. I've done that with social artists. I've done that for people in the business sector to help them think about things like copyright law. I've done a lot to try to help people understand, the gaps between an ideal world of law and how it really works, in the margins. So, if you've got questions about that, or you want to do a project on that, or you're doing a project like that in another class and you'd like my help or my perspective, feel free to let me know. Other than that, right, I look forward to hearing from you, and anything you need from me, let me know. The course, I think, is pretty structured, so it's basically organized under the content. I think we all have mixed feelings about Brightspace or Blackboard or all these other places. So, it does some things well and it struggles to do other things. So I try to just keep it as simple as possible. So if you go to the content tab, then you've got the table of contents. You click overview, that will take you to the syllabus. I don't use the bookmarks or the course schedule. You might be able to do something with that. I have no idea. But if you see the table of contents there, right, we've got readings, we've got a workbook, and we've got a final exam. A little annoying, in my opinion. You have to go to discussions, is not included here. I might play around with it to see if there's some way to get it in there. But, so then you go to the discussions tab and you'll see there's 6 different discussion board tabs, including in addition to the introductory, like let us know who you are and what you hope to do with your life, and a little bit about this class if you can concretely pin that down. So the workbook will take you to a Google form. The readings will all open up in your computer in Brightspace, and you'll make comments or what are called annotations in them. And the final exam will also be a link that opens up out into Google. So a lot of you are interested in points and what are things worth and what's your grade. So reading annotations are worth up to a total of 30 points. So 5 points, you can earn up to 5 points for 5 annotations following the instructions per reading, and there are 6 readings. The discussion boards, like I said, there's 7. They're worth 10 points each. So again, if you follow instructions, you can earn up to 10 points each. So 7 of those, 70 points. The workbook on Google Forms is a pass-fail thing, so if you finish it, then you get 40 points. If you don't, you don't. Final exam is worth up to 20 points. Some of you are like, well, what if I do half the workbook? Email me and we'll talk about it. We'll negotiate. Everything is negotiable. But wouldn't it just be easier to finish it and get the 40 points? The final exam is worth up to 20 points, obviously, depending on how well you are able to apply the learning to the exam. You can do extra credit. I always like it when you email me and say, hey, I have an extra credit idea. I think it's worth 50 points because of this. You have to have completed 2 annotated readings before you can do an extra credit. Plus, you have to do at least one of the discussion boards. So if you say, I have an extra credit, it's week 5, and you haven't done any of the readings and you haven't done any of the discussion boards, obviously, you got to do those first. I'll still let you do an extra credit, even though it'll be extremely difficult to get it done in a week. But hey, people do it. So I will always accept student work in that context. I will offer extra credit if there's like something that seems to be, I like to analyze your responses, the discussion boards, and the reading annotations. So if I see something that like maybe you're missing as a class, then I'll offer extra credit to help you catch up. Or if there's something super interesting, sometimes a class works together really well and you're kind of going in a certain direction that's super interesting. So then I'll give you like more of that. Hopefully, sometimes there's conflicts in the class, and so, we can resolve them through extra credit discussion boards. Hopefully there won't be. Just be nice people. Focus on your own learning. Try to learn from others. Yeah, so the discussion boards are pretty straightforward, right? So we've got introductions. Got to get that done by June 30th. Might as well get it done earlier, right? Opens up June 23rd, so get it done June 23rd. Then we'll move on to the concept of intersectionality, so you can apply it to the future readings. Then we'll think about how do these federal and state courts work? How do they work together? Might as well start talking about case law and precedent there, because that's really all the federal and state courts do. We'll move up to international law. We'll think about social economics or political economics, and what is your opinion, right? So the court does not agree. Supreme Court justices, some say it should influence, others don't. Kind of given the COVID pandemic, it's hard to see how it doesn't apply, even if you don't want it to. But hey, if you don't want it to, then you can take a position against that. I think that's largely what the most intelligent people of the MAGA supporters are, of which, they're not loud. But I think this is their argument. This is that global norms and global rules and international law should not necessarily influence domestic policy. So if you can articulate that in an intelligent way, then great. If you're on the left, on the far left, and you think that the opposite, then also please articulate that. I think there's a lot more people are louder in that camp and they talk more about it. And so I think it gets the benefit of having, it has to go through its own internal process of being proved or disproved, argued out, right? I don't think that's quite happened on the right, on the new right? Because this is not the conservative Republicans I knew growing up. This new form of Republicanism, right, is still kind of a baby and working its ideas out. So if you want to test those ideas out here, by all means, this is the place to do it. Module 4, right, is going to be like real concrete then. So we've kind of started very theoretical and now we're applying it to a very particular situation. So obviously I'm looking, can you apply intersectionality? Can you show me how the federal and state courts interact? Can you show me case law and precedent? And can you think about economics in the international sense? And then, it'll kind of just start wrapping up at that point, right? So then we'll move on to a review. Like, were you able to do the things, in module 4? If not, here's what you need to be able to do by the next module, which is the overall review. And basically, you're going to try to give like a reform perspective, because that's largely what the criminal justice major is. It's a reform kind of policy degree. And so I'm going to try to end with that to give you like a way of connecting to your future classes. And if you decide to go to John Jay, hopefully you'll be ready for that approach to looking at criminal justice and criminal law. So I think like if you wanted to think about just the readings, then what I'm asking you to do is to have feelings about the readings or opinions about the readings, not just like, oh, I agree or disagree. Tell me why. So if you have if you something you disagree with it and it makes you angry, then put an A there and tell me why it makes you angry. If you are confused by it, then you put a C and you say, I don't understand it. This is maybe why I don't agree with it. If you think something's surprising, like, hey, this is interesting. I wasn't like, well, you can use two codes. You can put interesting and surprising. So you can put an I and an S. So this is interesting and it surprised me, or it surprised me because it's interesting. If you have like, love has been brought up a lot in classes. So if you love something, if you really agree with it, I guess, I'm not really sure what love means in this context, but go ahead and use it. And so that kind of hints at the last thing is like, if you have a reaction on there that you think is important to include, I will add it, right? So I've added both love and R research. So some students have added additional research. I love it, right? Whatever you want. In that case, I mean love in the sense that like I really enjoy it when students do their own thing. With that said, you need to provide 5 annotations, 1 point for each annotation. And so here's how you do an annotation. You select the text that you want to annotate. You click the button annotate. Now, you then enter the annotation over in the text, and then you put post. Make sure you put post. Make sure one student had a bunch of posts but then had hidden them. Like, make sure you don't hide them. And make sure that, you can use the highlight function. I see lots of students use it. By all means, use it. Highlight through and then go back through and then do your annotations. That's the sensible thing to do, but not everybody has to do that. You could just do the annotations if that's how you feel about it. So I give you an example there. The workbook is pretty straightforward, right? So I tell you what it's there. It's help you like dive in deeper, think about it a little bit more, engage with the material, just helping you kind of be prepared. And then the final exam will open on July 28th and then close on August 3rd. So you have all that time. I believe it does it automatically, but I'll go ahead and double check it when it comes to that time. And it's a Google form. So you just go in, record your answers, and then boom. You're not going to get like some of you really want like this confirmation thing. I don't use that feature because it requires you to log in and use your email, and not everyone has a Gmail. And so some of you are gasping. And so I can't do it, right? I don't want to force people to get a Gmail just so I can get their answers. So, it's not that big of a deal. If you really need confirmation, you may email me and I will say, yes, I got it. Or I'll say, no, I didn't get it. So do it again. It's always a good idea to copy and paste your answers or to keep a copy. But, you do you. Final grading. It's pretty linear here. So if you want an A+, you got to get more than 160, which means you will have to do extra credit. If you say, I'm okay with an A, you don't have to do extra credit. If you're really struggling in this class and you say, man, I really need to get a C for this to transfer, email me and we'll figure something out and we'll get you some extra credit. Can you turn in things late? Almost entirely yes. Keyword is to communicate, email, let me know what's going on. But most of the time, yeah. There's only a couple situations in which you can't, the final exam being kind of the obvious one, but even that one is negotiable if you want to take the incomplete grade and we schedule everything out in advance, all the things they require us to do. The one that's not, right, is the class participation. There's rules that I have to follow as an instructor of the City University of New York here in New York State. And one of those is that if you haven't what they call engaged in the course, online course, by the VOE date, with the verification of enrollment, then I have to drop you. And I have to drop you for a few reasons. One is it affects your financial aid. So if I don't drop you, you can get in trouble with financial aid. Second is it affects the college. And so I don't want the college to get in trouble. And then the third thing is, don't you think you should have done something in the first week of class, like anything? I've had students who weren't able to, but they emailed me, right? And so we were able to figure it out. But if I just don't hear from you, and it should be the first 10 days, sometimes the calendar is a little bit different, so we'll have to double check. But, you should really have done something in the first week. And all we're asking you to do is the introductions on the discussion board and the first reading. So, if you're really like still working out your schedule and everything, and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to be really doing a bunch of work in the third week, fine, right? But just do these first two things in the first week. Maybe we don't hear it from you in the second week, but then you come back with a roar in the third week and you finish strong. Great, wonderful. But it's, you got to do something in the first week. This is a 6-week course. So if you fall behind, please email me. I will try to email some of you or I'll email you and your advisors through the system, the notification system. It works for some students. It doesn't work for other students. And it always breaks my heart when students don't finish, right? I think I can help everybody finish. And so if you can just give me the opportunity and you try to stick with it, we can get you there. And lots of students have been able to do it. So, even with all these terrible things that happen to us in life and our situations, right, we're able to kind of persevere. So I hope we can work together and we can do good things in this class. And I hope you all gel wonderfully and we do really super interesting things that I get to offer you extra credit for. With that said, this is all I have to say. Email me if you have any questions and have a great summer semester.